Being a man with a wife and kids is extremely hard. There are millions of things to deal with every day, and then you have to make time for your wife and kids. You feel you're expected to perform as a husband and father, or you think you should already know how to do these things. Following God to you is going to church on Sunday, and you think that is enough, but you know it is not. At the end of the day, no matter how hard you try, you keep failing in your most important relationships when it comes to God, your wife, and your kids. But I have seen what practicing humility can do for a man in becoming a great husband, a great father, and a true man of God. I have seen the impact of practicing humility in my own life, along with countless other men for the past 13 years of coaching. Most men either do not understand what humility is, or they have a misconception of what it is not. But even then, most men do not know how humility can change their lives, or how simple it can be. So let's talk about this. How to use humility to transform your life, every area of your life, so you can be on the road to victory and not defeat. Listen, I know humility is a scary word, but stick with me here. You may want to write this off, but do you really know the definition of humility? Most men are running away even now when I say the word. They don't understand what humility is, and they don't understand how it can transform their lives. Humility is not what you think. It's not being soft or weak. It's not complimenting others in the attempt to make you feel like you are below them. Humility is not even beating yourself up over and over again about your past mistakes. Humility does not mean you are a simple person. In fact, probably the biggest misconception most men have is that humility is some form of weakness, when in reality, it's one of the greatest forms of strength. So what does humility really mean anyway? Googling the definition, I get the following. No desire to impress, unpretending, unassuming, not proud, not arrogant, to bring low, to reduce in power, to reduce independence, to reduce exaltation, to lower. Okay, I get it. None of that definition sounds all that fun to us guys. But here's the deal. Everything you are good at and continue to be successful in today comes from humility at one time or another. Everything. Without humility, you cannot know what you do not know. Without humility, you cannot grow as a man, a husband, a father, or anything else you want to get better at. Without humility, you will never be teachable or coachable. Practicing humility is in the unlock to changing and rewiring your mind. You cannot grow and get better in anything without being humble to learn. When Vince Lombardi said, "Gentlemen, this isn't football," he was telling the team more than it's time to get back to the fundamentals. He was saying, act like you know nothing about football so that you are rewired to learn and grow. Be humble. Here's another quote we like to say. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. But do you realize that the quote is talking about humility? Everything and everyone around you becomes a teacher if you humble yourself and act like you don't know anything. When my wife wanted a divorce and I realized how wrong I was as a man and a husband, I cried out to God. I don't know how. I don't know how to be a man. I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to be a father. Will you show me? That was humility before God, and that was the first step in transforming my life and saving my marriage and my family. Every reference to humility in the Bible is rooted into making yourself lower than God or others. To help me remember this, I often say to myself when I'm frustrated, it's not about me. And sometimes I take it a step further and remind myself it is about God and His people, no matter their age or status. The Bible gives many examples of humility and its benefits. Proverbs 11:2 says, "Pride leads to disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." Sounds a lot like what we already discussed. You can't be teachable and ready to see and learn what you do not know unless you are humble first. You don't get wisdom without practicing humility. Jesus explains humility even further in Luke 14:11 when he says, "For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." So think about a man you admire and want to be like. I bet almost every time this man will have humility that draws you in. They are vulnerable. They are authentic. They don't act like they know much, and you are drawn to what they say because they are so real about the things and they have wisdom. In a sense, you exalt them and they don't even know it. Now think about the opposite, the men you don't like being around. I bet most of them are hung up on themselves, on how great they are. They are proud. and act like nothing can bother them, or they act like they know everything. Sooner or later you see them fall, and they find out they are not invincible. The greatest example of humility in the Bible comes from Philippians 2:5-8, which says, "Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in the human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross." Isn't that amazing? Our greatest example of humility is God himself, the creator of the universe, making himself as low as his creation in the form of a man, all for us. Jesus, the Son of God, is the example we cannot deny, and that is why there is no excuse in not practicing humility ourselves. As you learn and understand what humility is and what it is not, you begin to understand how humility can have a huge impact on every part of your life as a man. Following Christ's example begins to change you as a man, husband, and father. So what is stopping you from practicing humility? What keeps men running away from this word? If it is so great, then why do so few men live it? If this is the answer to life transformation, then why do you keep looking for another answer? I get it, and I understand. We just talked about the misconceptions of humility, and yet when we hear the truth of humility and its examples, we still don't want to do it. Let me shoot straight with you here. You are never going to feel like it. You will never wake up with a natural desire to be humble. The reason why is we have the gift of free will from God, allowing us to choose between elevating ourselves or elevating God. When Adam fell in the garden, it all started with the opposite of humility, pride. We all know pride. We all know how pride doesn't need to be practiced. Walking in pride is natural for us from birth. You don't have to teach a baby to be selfish or prideful. From my own life in coaching men, I have found that our pride is rooted in fear. Fear of man and fear of me. Fear of man is well known in the questions you ask yourself. What would they say if they knew the real me? What would they do if I asked for help? Would they still like me? Would they still love me? These are all fear of man questions you ask yourself whether you admit it or not. Fear of me is often overlooked and less considered. Fear of me is from the old man that died in Jesus on the cross. Fear of me is looking at life through the lens of all your abilities and inabilities. It's centered around doing things based on what you see rather than what God sees. Fear of me says, I can't trust what I might do, so I don't try. Or if I do try, I will make sure to sabotage myself, proving I can't be trusted. Fear of me comes in the form of fear of success and fear of failure, especially for followers of Christ. We would rather sabotage ourselves and follow a counterfeit humility that we created out of fear rather than practicing true humility in God. Walking in pride always makes life hard because God stands against us. James 4:6 says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. That word oppose is a military stance of God against us in any area we have pride in. It's like God is saying, I'm standing up against you here out of my love for you, and I cannot let you pass until you receive my grace and humility. But when we humble ourselves, we get to see God's empowering grace move in us because God stops holding a military stance against us. However, humility is not a cheat code to an easy life, but it is instead a rhythm of grace with God where you can see His power in all your life, no matter if it is easy or tough. You cannot avoid humility whether you like it or not. In your pride coming from fear of man and fear of me, you will eventually be humbled either by God or man. You can either decide to practice humility so you can see God's empowering grace, or you can choose to be humbled later by God's military stance against you. The choice is yours. This all sounds good. You're probably asking, how do I really do this? Where do I start? What does practicing humility really look like? I understand. Let's go over some practical ways to start on the road of humility. First off, you need to understand that this is a marathon and not a sprint. It's more about small, consistent daily steps rather than the occasional great stride. The Bible talks about this in 1 Peter 5:5, where Peter tells us to clothe ourselves in humility. In other words, practicing humility is like putting clothes on every day. You have to be intentional in putting on the garment of humility. You don't wake up humble. You wake up prideful, remember? It's like Peter was saying, you need to make humility a non-negotiable, intentional act, like putting on your clothes or brushing your teeth. Moving forward, you need to embrace that you cannot be humble without God. Embrace it as a good thing. You have to have Jesus to practice being humble. So start today by talking to God like a friend and just tell Him that you don't know what humility is. Say out loud, will you show me what humility looks like? Show me how and where to lower myself. This is how you put on humility like clothes or brushing your teeth. You ask God daily. Don't put it off until tomorrow. Start today. Start now. Imagine where you keep failing and just cry out to God. I don't know. I don't know how. Will you show me? I didn't realize what I was doing years ago when I cried out to God this way about being a man and husband. I just knew I was broken from trying to do it my way. Once I saw the grace in the answer of the ask, this quickly became a daily reoccurrence with God. Be specific and tell God what you don't know and ask Him to show you how. God is the source of teaching us what we do not know. However, He does use men in our lives to deliver the truth we are after. So think of the men that are stronger in areas you are weak. Go spend time with them and ask for their help. If you can't think of anyone, ask God to show you men that you can reach out to. Find ways to get around men that are stronger in areas of life you're weak in. This was instrumental for me when I went to my first men's retreat at church. This is where I got to spend time with men that had humility themselves, along with the skills and tools I lacked in being a husband and father. God is giving you ideas and thoughts all the time. Practicing humility is following through with the ideas and thoughts God gave you. Empty your mind of what you think you know, so God can show you what you do not know. Opportunities to practice humility are everywhere, but you have to be intentional in looking. Everything and everyone around you is an opportunity to be humble. From God to our wives, to our kids, to work, to church, to our friends, and anything else that comes to mind, they are all places where we can lower ourselves and practice humility. As you learn to practice humility, you start to see that it's not just about life transformation. Instead, a transformed life in humility becomes a byproduct of first getting to know Jesus. Getting to know Jesus becomes a reason to humble ourselves as life transformation seems to take care of itself then. When we humble ourselves consistently, we begin to see how weak we really are in changing our lives on our own. We realize spending more time with Jesus is the only way to have the strength to change. So what you need now is to learn what it looks like to spend time with Jesus daily. So click the link here to learn a simple system to begin a daily consistent quiet time with God for busy men.